Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University. Good morning, friends. I'm very excited coming to you here on a Sunday. A lot of thoughts today, a lot of exciting news to share. We do have 5 higher ed updates, a brand new interview, and a brand new Speakpipe question. But I want to start by sharing an announcement I'm very happy to share. So our most attentive listeners, our regular listeners, may remember way back in May or June when we went to our new format where we have Julia, and Susan and Vince on once a month in the news segments. We said that there are 4 additional weeks because 12 times 4 is 48. There's 52 weeks in the year, right? So every third month you have 5 weeks in the month. And we said that what we wanted to do was to have a current college admission professional be on for those weeks. And I'm here to announce that we have made a decision. Very excited about it. We will be having the team from Colorado College come on our podcast every 3 months. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is we already had Karen Kristoff on in Hillary Dickman, and we got tremendous feedback to both of those interviews. So I already know our listeners are really responsive. And there'll be 2 of the admission leaders that'll be in that rotation. Possibly also Matt, who's fantastic, who's the Dean of Admission, is also an alum. And I'm hoping every now and then we can get Mark, VP of Enrollment, who Susan worked with back in her days in Bates in the early 80s. So, but there's another reason. This is a team that's mature, insightful, knowledgeable, doing holistic admissions in all of its complexities. And an important part of podcasting is chemistry. And so these are people that I have good relationships with. And so that will come through as you listen. So very excited about that. We're still deciding whether they will have their first appearance in March or in June. But look for that. And we can talk with them about some real issues that they're grappling with in the admission office. And you can actually hear from a current person in the admission office now. And Susan's file reading, so we're getting a lot of that was Susan as well, but they're actually in committee and making committee decisions. So I think it'll be another nice dimension to add to the podcast. I just wanted to announce that. Okay, we have 5 higher ed updates, and then I want to get to our question and our new very exciting interview. So the first thing I want to share is some new research that has been done by Kaplan, who's had a survey of 300 admission officers, and they're looking at whether or not admission officers are looking at social media. And the new survey said that 65% of admission officers have no issue with social media being part of the admissions equation. Now, the reason why that's important is it's the trend line. It's great when these surveys are done asking the same questions year after year. So in 2019, that number was 59%, and in 2018 it's 57%. So the point is, social media is increasingly being seen as fair game. Now, 35% of admission officers said that it is a violation and invasion of privacy and it shouldn't be done, but that's a minority. Some more things that came from that I think you might be interested in. 36% of admission officers said that Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram is where they go. Now, that is holding steady with the 2019 survey, but up from 25% in the 2018 survey. Another thing that I thought might be of interest is 17% So about 1 in 6 say that they check social media about as often as they did in the 2019 survey. But once again, way up from 11% in the 2015 survey. Once again, love these longitudinal surveys. So I'm not sure if 2015 was the first year, but they certainly been asking this question every year, at least now, for 9 years in a row. One more thing that I thought might interest to you guys from this survey. 42% said that what they found in social media is mostly positive. That's up from 38% in the 2019 survey. Now, on the flip side, 58% said that what they found is having a negative impact. And that's up significantly from 32% in the 2019 survey. So the bottom line is, students, watch your social media because, you have to almost assume that it's being checked. Okay, now for my depressing updates. I do not like coming on here and talking about the person that I refer to as Baby Trump, a little Napoleon complex military general down there who won an election in the state of Florida and has a God complex. I don't like it, and he keeps doing things that infringe on academic freedom and come into the world of college admissions. I can't ignore it. So what did he say about defunding diversity, equity, inclusion programs? First of all, these are programs that bring students together to learn how to work together across racial, socioeconomic, and other lines. They're very valuable programs. We're all so segregated in society, and college is one of the few times when people actually come together, and it's an opportunity to learn from each other. So what did he say this week? He said, it's hostile to academic freedom, and check this quote, "We will make them wither on the vine." So he's showing increased intensity to defund all programs that help with understanding of each other through DEI initiatives. By the way, this is what Joy's doing at Duke's campus. You may know this. My youngest daughter works at Duke. She led a 60-person workshop this week for faculty members and students on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, little Napoleon down there, he's not just doing this on his own. So there's a very conservative institution called the Manhattan Institute, and it released its model in mid-January about how to completely defund these programs at public institutions. And he's basically taking his playbook from that. Well, here's a quote from the Manhattan Institute. It says this: "We have developed a playbook for state legislators to abolish DEI bureaucracies and restore colorblind equality in public universities." It sounds so great. Everybody wants colorblindness, but it's really a ruse. The truth of the matter is trying to take us back to the 1800s. Okay, unfortunately, I have to mention him one more time. So it's bad enough about the fight he's been having over AP African American history. But clearly, this whole idea of stoking white grievance, he appears to think it's working. And he is taking a playbook from, so I call him Baby Trump. He's taking a playbook from the former guy who basically rose to prominence by saying that, Barack Obama is not an American, and then coming down the escalator and saying very hostile things about Mexican Americans. And so he's realized, okay, I can stoke white grievance and get a hardcore 30% of the MAGA part of the party and either win the election or increase my power. And you can tell he thinks it's working for him, because it's not just enough now that he's going after African American history, AP African American history. Now he's talking about going after the entire College Board. So here's a few things that came out this week. The governor said Florida will look to reevaluate its relationship with the College Board. This College Board, nobody elected them to anything. They're just kind of out there. They're providing a service. So you can either utilize those services or not. But there are other vendors who may be able to do that job as good, or maybe even better, he said during a news conference in Naples this week. So it's created quite a fury, quite a controversy. The whole thing's a real debacle because, quite honestly, Coleman and the College Board have really fumbled this thing as well, because they sort of bent over backwards to try to get Florida not accept the course. So they stripped a lot of the most prominent authors that anyone taking a course like that would want to have. And then there's been a backlash against that. And then Little Napoleon, he's claiming credit, saying, hey, we got them to change. So he starts flexing. Then that caused the college board to have to do a walk back. And so in a statement posted on his website, the college board expressed regret at not pushing back against the DeSantis administration. We deeply regret not immediately denouncing the Florida Department of Education slander, magnified by the DeSantis administration's subsequent comments. Our failure that African American studies lacks educational value. Our failure to raise our voice betrayed Black scholars everywhere and those who have long toiled to build this remarkable field. So now they're on the defensive. They don't want to look like they're a pawn. And in Florida, they've moved on. So they're claiming victory that they've caused things to change, but then at the same time, not embracing it and moving on to other things. So, for example, flanked by legislative leaders this week, DeSantis said he has already talked with the House Speaker, Paul Renner, Palm Coast, about evaluating the state's use of College Board products, and they're having a meeting coming up on March 7th to discuss this. So here's a quote. I think the legislature is going to reevaluate kind of how Florida's doing that. We're going to kind of evaluate how that process goes. And so stay tuned for this, because this is going to, looks like it's going to trickle over, I'm sure, into U.S. history, into many, many other courses. And then I expect other more conservative states to realize that this is stoking a lot of passion, particularly for those who are really motivated by white grievance. And so I expect some other conservative states to adopt the same position. So look for it to spread. At the same time, I look for a tremendous backlash from parents across the board who feel like, hey, are you going to make my kid less competitive for college? My kid not going to be able to come in with AP credits? Like, what's absolutely going on here? So unfortunately, this is one thing I really don't like talking about, but I sort of feel I have to, because it crosses into college admissions, and I can't ignore anything that touches on college admissions. And for those of you who don't like I realize I'm editorializing a little bit, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to hesitate from telling you what I really think. And so if that's not your cup of tea, then you might want to just skip it when I talk about this topic, because I'm not going to back off from speaking truth to power. All right, let's move on to a more positive topic. The Rhode Island School of Design, also known as RISD, they announced Monday that they will be withdrawing from the U.S. News and World Report's college undergraduate rankings, saying the controversial lists do not reflect the value of the students or the academic programs. Private nonprofit college appears to be the first to reject U.S. News listing since the law and medical school stepped away. So this was inevitable. Once you saw law schools move en masse, med schools move en masse, you know that it was going to help impact the undergraduate rankings. This will be the first of dozens, in my opinion, that are going to join suit. Crystal Williams, RISD's president, said in a statement, the ranking system relies on exclusion and inequity. And check this out. And she hopes other colleges stop participating in it. So it's a story worth following. Once again, U.S. News is not shutting down. But what they can be is so discredited in the eyes of the public that people are like, oh, U.S. News, they don't even have real data. They're all over the place. What I'm hoping is that the public will come to realize that cumulative rankings that attempt to put the whole kit and caboodle together and say this school's 17, this school's 39, that will be discredited in the same way that we don't see, rankings of churches and out there and other things as well, because it seemed like you can't reject. How can you rank a church? Like I worship in a expressive manner. Somebody else worships in a more contemplative manner. I like a small church. You like a big church. We can't rank churches. That's my goal. I'm hoping that the public will come to that conclusion. I have a different view about rankings in college majors. I think there's a place for that, even that stuff is still highly subjective. You still want to look at formulas. All right. Last update. So I haven't really talked about this before. So this is a new one, and been a little asleep at the wheel because this has been going on for a while, but better late than never, as they say. So what happened last month was the NCAA permanently removed the requirement that first-year Division I and Division II athletes have to have a qualifying score in order to participate in NCAA sports. So in the past, students had to go through what most people think of as the clearinghouse, if you go back in the day, and get approved to be able to be academically qualified. While most of the emphasis was on GPA, it's sort of set up almost like a freshman index. Like the higher your GPA, the lower your test score could be, but you still had to meet a certain threshold in order to qualify. Now, Division III always kind of had its own thing. They created their own rules for their own eligibility, but Division I and Division II had explicit, concrete standards that had to be met. And basically what they're saying is after going through test optional through the last 3 years, then we're just going to continue with test optional in perpetuity. So that's kind of a big announcement as far as athletes goes.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Okay, friends, because we're so transparent, I will tell you that Lisa said, it's great, Mark, that we held under 10 minutes, but we got to have more conversation. So now I feel completely at liberty. I'm unchained, unfettered, not on the clock, and I'm my own self again.
Yay! Yeah, I felt a little bit like Vanna White sometimes on a couple of those questions.
We don't want you to be Vanna White. And I know who that is. I know who that is.
With the culture, but probably most people under 40 don't, but we do.
That's,
so that's
true.
Okay.
And that's our listeners. Hopefully they do.
Doing it though. I think she's.
Well, I didn't know that.
Wheel of Fortune. Yeah.
Wow,
So,
that's still
anyway.
going around.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So, you want do any intro on this? What do you want to say?
Oh, well, I know this is a really great question, and it comes from Tressa, and it's about the demographic cliff.
I attended a college panel at our daughter's school where 4 college admissions representatives mentioned the upcoming enrollment cliff. Our daughter's a 9th grader in the class of 2026. I wonder if you could talk about what this enrollment cliff means in practical terms for families and students in the coming years. One admissions counselor mentioned schools will begin recruiting more heavily in states where populations have increased, like Texas and Georgia. Thank you.
Well, it's about the demographic cliff, which is what I often use to refer to it. But the other term is, and this is you know what? I am actually making this our admissions vernacular, so that gives me more time. I'm not going to do an admissions vernacular in the start. This is going to be it. It's also referred to as the enrollment cliff. And If you've heard demographic cliff, which is the term I normally use, then that may be why it's a newer term, but they are used interchangeably. The demographic cliff, enrollment cliff, sometimes I'll call it the birth dearth. And so basically, what is it? It refers to the dramatic drop in the college-age population beginning in 2025. And so the interesting thing about forecasting the number of kids in college is it's a really easy thing to do because you can look at birth rates. And so you can just go back and look like what were the birth rates back in like 2008 and 2009 and 2007. And many of our listeners know that was a really tough time financially. In fact, it even has its name, the great name, given to it, the Great Recession. And basically what happened during those years is there was so much economic stress that people started having less kids.
Yes.
And particularly from 2008 to 2011, the number of kids just plummeted. And I'm going to start by saying this, Lisa, I'm not going to do as deep a dive on this because Dave is going to do, Dave and I are doing it in the news like pretty soon after this airs, not too much after. So we'll touch on it enough so we answer the question and then we'll go, we'll really go into it like in that. But I don't know if our real regular listeners remember this name or not, Nathan Graw, but Nathan Graw is very famous. I've referred him twice for our recommended resources. And he's kind of considered, he's an economist, but he's like considered sort of the foremost scholar in the country when it comes to studying the economics of education in relation to forecasting, trends when it comes to like births and implications and things like that. So he really made it famous during his book. He's had 2 books, and I've recommended them both times. They're kind of scholarly. They're for like the serious reader. They're not necessarily like easy breezy reading, but he kind of coined the term. And his first book came out in either 2016 or 2017, and it was really, really famous. And it was the demographics and demand for higher education. He basically scared the bejesus out of everybody in college. I would go to these conferences and people were freaking out. And I've attended his workshops twice at these conferences, but the whole college admissions landscape was freaking out. And even when I do a lot of my interviews with thought leaders, like before we get on air, like they'll be talking about this kind of thing. And so that was his first book, and then 4 years later, he did another book. I probably had this as a recommended resource, like maybe a few months ago, and it's called The Agile College. And basically he takes the stats of the forecasting and he says, in some ways he says, guess what? It's even worse because he has updated data. It's even worse than I thought. But the Agile College focuses a lot more on, okay, what can you do to survive, as opposed to just giving all these stats. Okay, here's what you need to do to survive. And, Dave and I, we've talked about this quite a bit, but, but still, there's a lot of new things going on with it. The bottom line is the Midwest and the Northeast are experiencing outmigration, and the West Coast and the South are experiencing in-migration. And so that's having a massive impact on colleges, leading to like more closures and mergers and downsizing, and it impacts recruitment. And I'll get to recruitment in a sec, but I don't want you to be Vanna White. So
I'll take
I got to hear your voice. So
yeah.
So what are your thoughts about what I've said so far?
Well, I mean, obviously, I have a student who's going to graduate in 2026, so I was very interested in this topic. But I do think it's really interesting when you think about it. It's like, it's very dependent on where you live, is how much this is going to affect you, is sort of the take that I got from it. So apparently, I think most kids only go to school 1 to 2 hours away from home, right? So if you're in a place where actually the number of college age kids has increased, like I think they're predicting, like in Houston, it'll be like 20%, like you're not going to feel like there's a cliff and, that you have a lot more space now. But if you're in, I think New York or Boston, you might. So it's just really interesting. It's not going to be a uniform experience at all.
Correct. That's why, Tressa's second part of her question, and she had these 4, college counselors on these back to school nights where they get on a panel and start talking about things. And they said that recruitment may be heavier in places like Georgia and Texas. And the way admission officers are adjusting to this is by doing a couple of things. Sending more regionals. We've talked about regionals before. Regionals are admission officers who don't live around the school. They actually live in their territory that they're recruiting. And it's actually, in my opinion, a really smart concept, because if you want to get more people, like for example, Miami, I was talking with Miami it's a few years ago now, but they're like, we are not seeing as many applicants as we think we should see out of Atlanta or Chicago. So we're setting regionals there. And places like Alabama and Tennessee and South Carolina really done really great job with regionals. Some of those schools have between 25 to 45 regionals spread throughout the country. That's why Alabama's become such a national school. For the last 5 years, Alabama has been 60% or more out of state.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, some of these schools have to do it because they're in conservative states and they don't believe in spending more for education. So they freeze the budget all the time. And so
Northerners pay for it.
Yeah, basically. It's the whole idea of like, I remember one time I was freaking out when I visited my brother about how much this was a long, long time ago, but how much my rent-a-car cost. And he was like, what do you think they're going to do with who are they going to hit up on the taxes, man? They're going to hit the out-of-stater, And so it's that concept. You know, you can get triple the tuition, or even if you can even throw a generous merit scholarship at somebody and still bring in more revenue. So that's one thing you're going to see is more regionals. But even apart from more regionals, even if you don't have that, let's say you are an admission officer, and let's say you normally, I'll use Houston as one of the examples you gave. Let's say you normally go to Houston for 2 days a year. Why not go to Houston for 7 or 10 and camp out?
Right.
And do more fairs, more school visits, more CBO visits. So that's basically, you know, the concept is, you know, people are at a premium. Now I don't want to get too much into this because they have nothing to talk about, but there's some other factors that are making it more chronic. It's not just the fact that bursts are going to be down. Bursts were down during 8 to 11. And people were like, look, financial times are tough. We can't keep having these expensive babies. There's some other factors. And a couple of big ones have to do with, particularly in conservative circles, the value of college is really, really being challenged. I literally saw this today, Lisa, even that this was done in the summer. It was a 538 survey. College is the best way to get ahead. Democrats, 71%, Republicans, 37%.
Right.
So you're talking about 1 in 3 pretty much now, and that's down over 20% in not that many years. So, particularly in certain circles, college is being challenged. And then you also throw in the fact that with the unemployment rate being so low, businesses are offering 20 to 25 an hour to what they used to do 8 to 10 an hour.
Right.
Which is really hitting
more livable. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really also making it you know, challenging for young men, are really finding that appealing. And, you know, this is the kind of thing it's hitting the community colleges really, really hard. It's hitting the regional publics really, really hard.
Right.
Not so much flagships and not so much brand name private schools.
Right. Yeah, I read that like apparently like at some point pretty soon, only 42% of high school graduates are going to be white. And so with that changing demographic, you know, schools have to change the recruiting. They have to change how, you know, they're handling diversity, and they have to maybe change some of their educational strategies in order to entice, you know, more students because their traditional base is just not there.
And one of the challenges with that is the gap in net worth between white families and Black families and Latino families.
Right.
So now, I mean, obviously, anytime I say something like this, somebody's going to write an aggressive email. But I'm not implying that like all Black and Latino families are poor. I'm not saying that. But there's a financial gap. So that also has ramifications for how much more money schools have to have in their financial aid in order to recruit and retain. Exactly. So it's really a widespread problem. It's a confluence of all kinds of things coming together at once. But the specific term enrollment cliff, demographic cliff, it has to do like a cliff. It's literally like a drop off that happened during those years.
Yeah. It's really interesting because when I looked at the graph, it's like 2024, like this right now, there's so many more kids. And, you know, I think we're all feeling that, you know, like there's not enough room at the end, it feels like. And we keep talking about how everybody is, you know, all these places are increasing their selectivity, but I think there are just a lot more kids right now. And then it falls off. But I think that probably for Tressa and maybe for me, our 9th graders aren't really going to get any kind of boost from that. You know, and because I moved, I'll probably get dinged. So, you know.
Well, and the other thing too is I would push back just a little on what you said. Like if you look at the stats for community college and regional publics, they're way down. It's that whole saying that the in-demand schools are really still really in demand. And families usually that have a student who's excelling in school are usually looking at more of those schools.
Right.
You know, and those are the schools that are tougher. But if you look at what's happening, it's really a tale of the haves and have-nots right now. It's really tough right now for community college and regional publics. And also private schools that lack endowments, lack brand name, and have bad locations. Like that, in some ways, they're even worse because they just have such little government funding. So, and then it's also challenging time for the art schools and the women's colleges. Like those are a lot of the ones that you're seeing merging and closing. And it's usually even more of them than the publics. And I'll tell you what, a lot of schools have survived because they got a lot of government funding through programs during recent COVID, and they've relied on that money. And so when you pull that away, it's going to be,
Yeah.
So. Well, listen, this was closer to the 15-minute version, but I hope I didn't give you Vanna White treatment.
You didn't Vanna White me, no. You did not.
But now we have a code word anytime I'm doing it. Stop Vanna me. Whatever. We'll make it a verb.
Vanna's going to write in and be like, I just really don't like the way you've described my work.
Or she's going to say, you don't have the trademark to use my name like that. Give me my royalty. Give me my royalty fees.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa.
All right. Thank you.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
And we have a brand new interview, and it's one that I'm very excited about. Lisa is the leader, and she interviews Kirby MciIlyar, and they look at the topic of how a student can know what college major is right for them. It's a fantastic interview, and it's also entertaining, so get ready to laugh.
Hi, this is Lisa, and I am so pleased to be here with Kirby MciIlyar. Kirby's going to tell you about her background, but she is an expert on how to choose your major and your career. And I am so excited to talk to Kirby because honestly, this is the number one question that students ask me. How do I know what I want to major in? And when I talked to Kirby about it, for our pre-meeting, it was like a revelation to me. Some of these ideas, like how could I not have thought of this before? But I probably our listeners haven't either. So I'm super excited to have Kirby today, and I know she's going to help us all find out what we're going to do in our lives. So Kirby, tell me a little bit about your background, how you came to do what you do.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So I got my bachelor's degree in psychology from Colorado College. And then worked in D.C. for a few years after college on the Hill and healthcare policy work for Ernst & Young, all funny things. Then moved to Boulder. And that is really where I started working with college students. Moved to Boulder and worked for the Dean of Students doing special projects, among them research for Robert Wood Johnson for the binge drinking problem on college campuses, but did a lot of special projects. Gosh. And then transitioned to an arts and sciences role as an academic advisor at CU Boulder, working with undergrads. And CU Boulder, for context, is big. It's the flagship university in Colorado, 31,000 undergrads. So arts and sciences open option is really often a holding pool. So for students who don't know what they want to major in, but probably something in arts and sciences will just be open option. Or some students who maybe applied to the College of Business or Engineering and got rejected, but really wanted to come to CU Boulder will get tucked there, will get put in open option arts and sciences. So I helped those students there. I had a caseload of about 400 people. So it gives you a sense.
Oh my goodness.
I know. And I had to meet with them twice for a year for them to register for classes. So it was a busy job, but fun. You help students figure out, do you want to major in arts and sciences? There's 60 or more majors there. Or, hey, is your dream really to transfer out of here and get into arts, to engineering or business? So just figuring out those requirements, course sequences, and all that. So I'm trying to think. So after CU Boulder, I then started working on my master's degree at the University of Denver. So about 45 minutes away, and working in the counseling psych program there. And continued working at CU Boulder, also kind of juggling the two. And then eventually transitioned to the University of Denver after I finished grad school. I worked at DU, it's what it's called, and it's a small private school, 6,000 students. And I was a career counselor for them, so a slightly different role. So instead of academic advising, just exclusively career counseling. And I worked with business undergrads. That was my specialty, the business students. And that was a lot of fun. Very different vibe. Small private school, just really fun, helping students figure out, career paths, internships, summer jobs, jobs after graduation. Lots of fun. I really liked that. And so then on the side of that, I was in the evenings getting my clinical hours towards my licensure.
Oh boy. And when did you sleep?
I know. It was kind of wild, but at least I was done with the commute to Boulder. So I was exclusively in Denver at this point. And I worked in the student health center in counseling services, just doing therapy after my day job. So I would just see a couple of clients every 2 or 3 days a week. So that is when I started doing that part of my profession. So I was doing career counseling during the day and personal counseling at night at DU. That's when I got my licensed professional counseling degree. So I'm an LPC, licensed in Colorado. And I would say that's what brings me to today. I do both those things today. I am in private practice. My website's kirbycounseling.com. And I work with CU students predominantly, the undergrads. And I do either or both, career counseling and personal counseling with generally CU students. I have a couple out-of-state students who meet me virtually, but it's a lot of fun. I wear both hats. So it's a nice mix.
Yeah. And I think that, dealing with like your, growing up issues and emotional issues and finding out what you want to do, those are like separate but related processes. So it's great that you can do both at the same time. So
it's fun.
Fabulous.
I would say I toggle. I'd say I have 2 or 3 clients that I do both with. And they'll just say, hey, I'm super stressed out. Let's just talk about what's going on in my life. Or, hey, I'm feeling good. Let's focus on summer internships. Let's focus on life after graduation. So I really like it. Yeah, it's a fun mix.
Yeah, that's like a really fascinating path. I think, so many just, if there are any kids or parents of kids listening to this, like as you can see with Kirby, like she did a bunch of different jobs before she found what was sort of the secret sauce for her. And I think we all do that. But somehow we're expecting sometimes 17-year-old kids to have a straight arrow path. And, but that's just not how life usually works. So we'll probably talk more about that more in the interview.
We will.
So, selecting a major, it kind of seems like when I think about that, I think like if I should have some kind of grand epiphany where it occur to me out of nowhere what I want to do with my life. And I think a lot of people keep waiting for that to happen. And then when it doesn't, they get nervous or they feel very confused. But what I loved about talking with you is you gave us some really great concrete steps that people could take to start this process. So what's step number 1?
Got it. Well, that's a good question. I would say the no-brainer, the easiest first thing to do is to look at the online description of that major and what are the courses required and read the course descriptions. I think that is a super easy, non-scary, no phone calls, no informational interviews. Just look it up. And that'll really show you. I can't tell you how many people who think they want to go into business and then see that their university would require Calc 1 and 2. And they're like, no, peace out. I can't do that. I'll just major in something else.
Yeah. I know for my daughter, she was kind of trying to pick between like strategic communications and communication design, and communication design is a very artsy major. You're creating visual things. When she found out she had to take classes in the business school for strategic communication, she was like, yeah, that's not for me. Right. I don't think that's, I don't think I'm going to do well with that. So I will just stay here and make beautiful things. But it was a powerful exercise that I saw with my own 2 eyes. So, and I tell this to students and they kind of look at me like I'm nuts, but if you're interested, let's say you want to attend Northeastern University and you're interested in their biology, maybe you want to be a biologist, look at what classes you'd have to take, what kind of, practicums and research that you'd have to do. And if you have like a short list of schools, like maybe 6 or 7, look at what each one of those have, to offer for that major. And does that make you say yes or like heck no? Because you'll be surprised at how many times heck no comes up. I'm sure you have so many examples of that in your career, countless examples.
Oh, yes, yes. Especially if someone thinks they want, the flexibility to study abroad or the flexibility to minor in something. And they realize that a major is just really tight, lots of requirements and not much flexibility. That could turn them off.
Right.
So that is just a super easy first step. Even your shyest, least networking type of student can do that.
Yeah. Like just be quiet in your room by yourself, clicking and reading.
Right.
And I think you bring up a great point. And the other thing to look at is what are the requirements and how else would that fit in with what your other goals in college are. So for instance, a lot of engineering or computer science majors that I know, it's a little bit harder for them to put a study abroad semester in their schedule.
Definitely.
So if that's something that's important to you, like you got to at least look at a school that might have something set up for that.
Exactly. No, that's a really good point. I just met with an engineering major yesterday who figured out a way to do 2 weeks in Vienna, a Maymester for 2 weeks. That's all she had time for. Yeah.
Yeah. But still, I'm sure she would have loved to do more.
Right. So I would say going down the hierarchy of like, what is first step, what is second? The second easiest approach, I think, is to meet with a departmental academic advisor. And at a big state university like CU, this is often a staff person whose job it is to meet with prospective majors. At a smaller school, that would typically be a professor. So what I would do is just be strategic about your timing of that, especially at a big state school. You will have seasons that are super busy for advisors where they're just registering kids and drop ads or whatever. There's just different seasons that are busy. So I would say generally early to mid semester is a great time to reach out. It's usually really mellow. At CU, November and April are crazy. So I assume at other state universities on a semester system, that's when they would be busy. But what I found is that especially the professors in the smaller departments, they love talking about their field. They love it. And, it's a joy for them to talk about it. And it is not an inconvenience. You're not bothering anyone. And so that is just something I really want to emphasize to students. Put yourself out there. Don't be so shy. Don't feel like you're bugging someone or wasting their time. They went into student affairs for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So that is just something I have to encourage my students to do. It's just, show up.
Yeah, to push them out. There's so much anxiety I think kids have. And I think that's, a developmental thing, like talking to grownups, and people who are in positions of authority or up the hierarchy, but it's a great skill to start. You can't start that too early, in my opinion.
You could not. So, let's say you reach out to the history department and you kind of get a cranky staff person who is just not that helpful. And she just sort of pushes a piece of paper at your face and says, here are the requirements. But you want to go deeper. This is just not really what you're looking for. You could have found that online. Then what I would do is try to find a professor in that department that is known for being, friendly and a good communicator with students. That is going to be a great resource for you. So you can find that by asking kind of that cranky staff person. I'm sorry to be negative about this, but just experience. I've seen this happen. You could ask them who is real approachable and likes to meet with students. You could ask a friend in that major who they've loved, what teachers would be fun to talk to, what professors. You could even look up professor ratings. So on ratemyprofessor.com or even the own school will have their own portal and who teaches some of the basic requirements that you're thinking about and who has good student reviews.
Mm-hmm.
So then the next thing is just attend those office hours. And this is interesting. And I'm wondering if this is different at small schools, but my experience at big state schools is lots of kids do not go to office hours.
Oh, yeah. I don't think that's just for state schools.
I just don't get it. It is just the best resource ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have friends, and my husband Dave is an adjunct professor, and I would say his 15 weeks he offers office hours, maybe he has someone 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's just crazy. And he would love to network with people and talk about internships or talk about jobs or talk about the career or even, confusion about class material. But people show up right before the final.
Yeah. I think you make such a good point. And obviously, for kids, the more you can get to know your professors, and that includes going to office hours, like you're going to get so much more out of your college experience. And you're probably going to get a lot more, help in terms of like finding jobs or letters of reference or things like that, because they know that you're somebody who's motivated and interested in learning, and you're like a face to them.
Yes.
So there's so many benefits, even just beyond figuring out what your major is, of talking to people who are professors.
Exactly. And what I've also seen, I'm thinking about a client in the fall. She had a professor waive some things and give her credit for an internship she did last summer, or let her substitute this class versus that class. I mean, things that are really not in writing that they could just override and do for you. And so she made her college major a better fit for her.
Right. Yeah. Now I know like that's all this stuff is super helpful for kids who are out of school, but I think even in the admissions process, applicants can do some of this. Like if you are interested, you're not sure you want to be, let's say, a classics major, and you're interested in William and Mary, and you ask the admissions counselor, like, I've read the catalog, I think I'm interested, I would really love to talk to a professor about the field and see if it's good for me. And they will, I don't see people saying no to that,
Wow, right. That's
and
interesting.
then, it's not only like, are you getting more information, but that shows you're a certain kind of student that it might make you more of an attractive candidate. I'm not saying that every kid should start like as a strategy asking professors, but if this is something that's a genuine question to you, I'm working with a student now and he is not sure if he wants to study industrial design. And there's a school in his town that is like very well known for industrial design, but it's also the kind of school that's like super welcoming. You don't have to have any prerequisites. And so I'm trying to arrange for them to go on a tour and talk to some faculty there, because I really think that will help him decide whether it's for him or not. So, I mean, you can do this at different points in your life, in your academic career.
That's really interesting about, even pre-applying. I think that's a great idea. Such a good idea.
Yeah.
So then I have 2 more ideas for this, how to select a major. This one's pretty funny, but I swear it works. Is just sitting in on a class at a bigger school that has a lot of seats. Just go to a class. And you're like, well, how do you know where they meet or what time? How do you know if there's seats available? That is generally available online. You can see, it's a 60-person auditorium, but only 40 are enrolled. And you could reach out to the professor and ask in advance or just go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I have a funny story. I have a student who really has trouble getting things done. And she's a speech language hearing sciences major, so a very specific different major. Well, she goes to business classes with her roommate so that she will get stuff done. So she just sits in the back.
She just does her homework.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And no one asks what she's doing there. She just gets it done. But imagine if you're sitting in on a major requirement, you would just really get a sense if that's a good fit for you or not. One good idea about reaching out in advance, if you don't already have a friend in that class, it's just making sure you don't show up on a midterm or an exam or something.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. You want to not show up at an inopportune time. Yeah. And I think even in a smaller school, right, like you could, email the professor and just say like, hey, I'm kind of curious about, your subject. Do you mind is there a good day that I could just stop by your class and just sit in the back and see what's happening to see if it's a good fit for me? And again, I just don't see people saying no to that.
No way. No way.
Friends, this concludes the first part of our 3-part interview. I hope you'll join us next week for part 2 of 3. On Thursday's episode, Julia's my co-pilot, and we continue the conversation of Marie McQuaid's blog article, 10 Application Mistakes to Avoid. Remember, Marie's a former MIT admission officer, and she reflects on why students didn't get in. If you didn't hear the first part, you'll want to go back and hear that with Vince last week. Lisa and I will answer a Speakpipe question from Haley from Arizona, and she wants to know, when should students start their ACT or SAT prep? And Ron A. Turner, the vice provost at Wash U in St. Louis, is back. Part 2 of 3, Understanding Wash U. And Linda joins me to do a college spotlight on the University of Redlands. And friends, I want to close with a different quote. I'm doing this thing in Black History Month where I'm kind of acknowledging famous Black Americans who had some profound quotes. And I'm going to make a general statement, and then I'll get more specific. So, a lot of times the word agitate is a negative word, but it shouldn't be. If you want to make change and policies at the school that you're at, whether it's a high school or a college, perhaps it's discriminatory or unethical, you're going to probably have to agitate. Or nothing's going to happen. You're trying to change your own job situation where you work as a parent, or get your salary structure changed, or your job description changed. Most of the time, that's not just going to happen unless you agitate. John Lewis called it good trouble. Here's one of my favorite quotes. And I oftentimes ask interviewees, if you could meet anybody famous who's not alive, who would you want to meet? And if I was asked that question, I probably would say Frederick Douglass. So here's one of my favorite quotes from Frederick Douglass, the great abolitionist. Here's what he says. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are people who want crops without plowing the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the roar of its many waters. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or maybe both. But it must be a struggle. And there's a famous quote. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will, from the great Frederick Douglass. And of course, he's talking in the context of civil rights, but I would say it applies to anything when you're trying to have some major change occur. Okay, friends, see you on Thursday. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stylianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.